Oh, good morning. Sometimes we want to get close, and I mean real close. Yes, I'm talking about macro photography. But macro photography, it's horribly expensive, right? Because we need to have a real dedicated macro lens, and they cost hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of bucks. No, we don't, right? What if I told you that we can do macro photography with every lens or almost every lens out there, including the lenses you already have, right? What about that? So I made a video, or I think two videos, on macro tubes already, right? You will find the link in the description of this video and somewhere up here, I guess. So macro tubes are comparatively dirt cheap extensions for your camera. And when I say extensions, I mean really extensions that allow you to convert your already existing lenses into macro lenses. Macro tubes have two big advantages. One is that they fit every lens you have. Well, if the lens fits your camera, it will fit the macro tube. The other, even greater advantage is that you have virtually no picture quality loss because there's nothing in these tubes that could cause that picture quality loss because they're tubes. Nothing more, nothing less, right? There's nothing in there. In this video, I will show you yet another way how to quote unquote convert your already existing lenses into macro lenses. And well, we can do that by using close-up lenses. What are close-up lenses? Close-up lenses are lenses that we can screw at the front part of our lenses, right? And they act as sort of kind of right, reading glasses for our lenses. And well, I was pleasantly surprised by the set of close-up lenses that I got, at least in some aspects. I was not pleasantly surprised about some other aspects. What these aspects are, the pros and cons, and compared to pictures made with these macro tubes, that is what this video is about. And since now we have the possibility to shoot macros even without having a macro lens, what about taking the advantage and go hunting for textures in our everyday surroundings, just the way I did it for this month's abstract challenge. This month's abstract challenge to be found at abstract-challenge.tumblr.com. By the way, link is in the description. This month's challenge is about black and white abstract textures. And if you don't know how to shoot black and white, don't despair, because I have I think it's pretty good video about black and white conversion in Lightroom. So if you want to do that after the fact, of course you can also do that in camera. But if you want to do it after the fact, I have a video on my channel. So link is also in the description, and I think somewhere up here. So enough rambling. Let's start. My name is Pete. I like pictures. Roll the intro. Other than macro tubes and close-up lenses, there is yet another way how to quote-unquote convert our already existing lenses into macro lenses, and that is to use retro adapters. What is a retro adapter? Retro adapter allows us to attach our lenses the other way round on our camera, which apparently does the trick. I don't have one of these adapters, but I'm curious, so maybe I will get one in the near future, and maybe I will make a video about that. But this video is about close-up lenses. Very similar to my macro tubes that came in a set of 3. My close-up lenses also came in a set of 3, and they are also, just as the macro tubes, stackable. Meaning, when we add a lens, just like when we add a tube, we will add, well, actually we don't add anything, but remove something. A real macro lens like this 60mm has a reproduction scale of 1:1 at minimum focusing distance. Meaning, if we, for example, take a photo of a bug that is half an inch in real life and we get as close as we can so that we can still focus, the projection of that bug onto the sensor of our camera is also half an inch. The problem with regular non-macro lenses is that we can't get close enough to have this 1:1 reproduction scale, because the minimum focusing distance is not small enough. We're too close to be able to focus. And that is where all these mentioned solutions, right, the macro tubes, the retro adapters, and the close-up lenses kick in. They reduce the minimum focusing distance, allowing us to get closer and still get everything in focus. And the closer we can get, the bigger the reproduction scale of that specific lens. In my video, How Much Macro Will I Get with Extension Tubes, I made a little experiment with my 50mm 1.8-2. That has a minimum focusing distance of 45 centimeters, that is about 1.5 feet. What I did was to take a small object that we all know the size of, in my case a match, and I put it on the lid of a film container, right? And I took photos at minimum focusing distance. First with a bare lens, right? And then with the macro tubes, and then later with the close-up lenses. And I compared the photos. A photo of the match with a bare lens at minimum focusing distance looks like this. Not really macro, is it? With all the 3 tubes applied though, that's how close I was able to get, and that's pretty impressive, huh? That's even a slightly bigger magnification than with a real 1:1 macro lens. Let's see how the close-up lenses perform. How close will I be able to get? And will there be visible degradation of the picture? Something that I assume will happen because, well, we add glass, right? So there will be light refraction, and we add not just one layer of glass, we add, when we stack them, 3 layers of glass. So the light will not only have to go through the lens itself, but also to 1, 2, 3 more layers of glass. And that will, at least that is my assumption, lead to very visible light refraction, and so to a degradation of the picture. The lenses come in +1 diopter, +2 diopter, and +4 diopter strength. And when we stack them, we get stronger results. This again is the size of the match with just the bare 50mm lens at minimum focusing distance of about 1.5 feet, 45 centimeters. This is how close I was able to get with the 3 macro tubes. And this is how close I was able to get with the 3 close-up lenses. With all 3 lenses stacked, I can reduce the minimum focusing distance to about half its length, which is pretty cool. But still, I can get more punch and I can get more magnification with the macro tubes. Since for this test I shot JPEG only, I made a comparison raw photo to get a real impression on how these close-up lenses really perform when stacked together, to see the chromatic aberrations and distortions, etc. Zoomed in at 1:1, we see slight, I think I see chromatic aberrations at the border, right? So let's get even closer, 2:1, and yes, there are. And this is this glow around the contrast edges, which is pretty typical for lenses like that. And yeah, we can try to remove it with the remove chromatic aberration function of Lightroom, but it doesn't really do a lot. So maybe if we use the manual, so find a good spot here. Cannot set the purple or green fringe color, yeah, because there's no purple or green. There's purple, right? We can use purple, and that does a bit, but it's still there. It's still here, there. So yeah, I also did a very, very non-scientific test to get at least a bit of a feel for which kind of distortion these close-up lenses produce or will produce. And so I put a gridded piece of paper on my window to have some backlight, right? And I took some shots with my 50mm lens and also with my 24mm lens. This is the shot I made with the 24mm and the 3 close-up lenses stacked together. And you see there's, again, this is a non-scientific test that was hand-holded, so it's not really perfectly lined up. Yet we still see a bit of a, we see there's a bit of blurriness at the borders, right? And we also, I think I see a bit of a chromatic aberration, like the slightly yellowish, bluish chromatic aberrations at the sides, right? And I also see a bit of a distortion. We can check with the lens correction because with my 24mm lens, there's a lens correction available in Lightroom. This is still Lightroom 6. I have Lightroom CC on my other computer. So if we enable the profile correction, it will make things even worse, right? So there is sort of a heavy distortion that these close-up lenses make. So, and they apparently they counteract or counterbalance what the lens does. So yeah. What do you prefer? I prefer that, to be very honest. And we also see that it's very slight and again very non-scientific. If we take the pipette and let's just take a look at the values here, right? The red, green, and blue values. If you're in the center, we're at about 86 to 89, right? And if we're at the frame, it's 84, something like that, 84, 85. So it's a bit darker but the vignetting is not so heavy. So I can live with that. The distortion is a bit stronger, right? This is the shot that I took with a 50mm lens, and I don't really see any really strong visible distortions. Again, this is a non-scientific test. This is just a gridded piece of paper taped to my window. So I don't really know, but I presume that this is a distortion made by the lens. So yeah, it is slight distortion. I'm not really put off by that. I'm actually surprised that it's not stronger. And let's take a look at the red, green, and blue values that you see under the histogram. So if I'm in the middle here, we saw 80, something between 85, 86, right? Red, green, blue, 88, something like that. And if we go more to the borders, we're at 84, 82. So not really a strong vignetting. So also very surprising. But I think there is a bit of a blurriness. So, and we see chromatic aberrations here. So these are pretty apparent here. Again, this is and it's almost as, yeah, it's the same strength on the other side. So yes, sure, I didn't use, it was handhold, so anything but scientific, but I think it's still apparent. On the other hand, I think it's pretty impressive for just 3 pieces of glass slapped together for 20, I don't know, 20 or 30 bucks. So I like that. The 24mm lens doesn't really make sense in my personal opinion, because that is not a lens that we would use for macro, right? Because we want to have more punch, we want to have a bigger magnification factor, and the bigger the magnification factor, the more impressive, the closer the pictures will be and the closer we can get. So the 50mm lens, in my personal opinion, is a very good choice, because as we saw in the test with the match that I made, we can get pretty close with that. So a 50mm lens on a crop sensor camera like mine is already sort of a telephoto lens, because the angle of view is about the same as an 80mm lens on a full frame camera. So as you saw, we even have a more magnification than with a real 1:1 macro lens. And so I had the slight impression that the very, very little distortions are because we have that crop within the lens already, right? But even the the picture with the 24 millimeter lens looks pretty great. So I was really surprised concerning the quality, the picture quality of these on lens filters or on lens lenses. I would have expected something far worse than that. Still, I would use the macro tubes for macro photos for two reasons. Reason number one is that I have absolutely no quality loss in my photos, right? Because I will maintain the image quality of the lens that I have. And especially with macros, we want to see fine details, right? And the more glass we add, even quite obviously comparatively good quality glass, which still surprises me for the price, we will lose detail. And we have these chromatic aberrations that are not from the lens, but from the stacked close-up lenses, from the lens itself, but from the stacked close-up lenses, right? So since these things are about the same price point, I don't see any reason for using a close-up lens. And another thing is that the close-up lenses, they are dependent on the filter diameter of our lens, right? So we can only use them on lenses with the same filter diameter, while the macro tubes are universal. Of course, there are adapter rings, right? For we can buy a big lens and then use it on small, or a big filter lens, right? And use them on smaller lenses, right? With a smaller diameter by using step-up rings, stuff like that. But to me, this is all too complicated. For me, photography should be fun, and this is the easiest for me. Macro tubes are the easiest and most affordable way to get the best quality pictures with my already existing lenses. And I presume, and even though I'm still tempted to get a retro adapter, which are comparatively cheap, the basic ones are really cheap. There are more advanced ones with cables that allow you to allow your camera to communicate with the lens, but they're very basic ones that you can just put your lens in reverse on the camera. Then you have to do everything manually. I don't know, because I don't know what will happen with the aperture. So this is what kind of interests me about that. So enough rambling about that. And you also need a set of these adapters for every filter diameter or step-up rings, which is, as I see it, for me, too complicated, because I have these macro tubes which just work perfectly. And yeah, this one's for today. Bye bye. Till next time.
Daddy, I don't want to miss any of Pete's videos.
Well, then subscribe to his channel.